Hey folks, this is Omari Richards, and I'm here with a special treat for you on this Juneteenth. This is Authors on Authors, in which I will speak with fellow authors in the indie and traditionally published space, where we will talk about our books, publishing, and this crazy ride that is writing. And today on this special Juneteenth episode, I am blessed with the presence of Jordan Hampton, author of World of Yaneshu, an epic high Afro fantasy. Let me hold it up a bit higher. There we go, because this cover is awesome.
Let me do that too.
Jordan is a minister, he is a martial artist, he is a father, he is a husband, he is an author, and all around great creative mind. And it is an honor for him to join us today. How are you today, Jordan?
Well, I feel a little out of sorts considering your intro. I don't always know how to handle being gassed up, but I'm going to take that in stride. Aside from that, I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing just fine. It is Juneteenth. It's the second anniversary of my hefty book, The Kimoni Legacy.
Yep, that one.
Yep. And I am just enjoying the day and can't wait to pick your brain about World of Yaneshu.
Uh, it's a good thing because I have so many questions for you as well.
Well, hopefully you have questions. I have questions. I hope the people watching right now have questions, and then we can do a Q&A and just geek out about our work, because if we don't geek out about it, who will?
Very true. And there's so much to geek out about. Like I'm still reeling. I'm still mad about Nomuleki, but I'm gonna ignore that for the time being.
Okay. So just to give everyone a little bit idea of the structure of this madness, we both read each other's books pretty thoroughly, and we're both very eager to just go into a deep dive about the themes, characters, plot, and setting. So there will be some heavy spoilers. So if you hadn't read either of our books, I will be sure to give a little warning when we start to get into spoiler territory and spoiler questions. I will ask some introduction and non-spoilerly questions to warm up, and then once we get into spoilers, I will send up the red flare and say, "Okay, if you've heard enough, go buy our books, start reading it, and then come back." Or if you don't, or if you're one of those readers who don't mind spoilers and think spoilers enhance your experience, feel free to stay, pick our brains, all that good stuff. Either way, don't say we did not warn you about spoilers.
Mhm.
All right. And now that that's out of the way, let's start with some introductory questions. So how did you first get into writing, Jordan? Because with that resume, I'm curious how you decided to add author and writer to that.
Actually, author and writer was first, and it was out of boredom. I I actually started writing when I was in fifth grade. Uh,
Ooh.
I was at my grandmother's house. It was during a time period where my mom had cancer and she was being
Ooh.
treated in San Antonio. So we came back from Germany. My mom was in the military while she and my dad were in San Antonio getting treatment. Uh, my sister and I were with my grandmother in Mississippi. So that's where I finished my fifth grade year. And so I was bored because my grandmother did not have a very robust cable plan. So
Mm.
I'm sitting there watching what I can watch, and it's mostly reruns. So I'm like, you know what? I can probably tell a better story at this point. Let me try. It was not better. It was
No.
actually way worse because I was a fifth grader. Getting started with it, I ended up falling in love with it, and I just kept going until we ended up on the Word of Yaneshu.
Oh, wow.
What about you? How did you get into writing? Because I don't think we ever discussed that.
Oh, long story short, I've always been into reading and writing because my dad used to read to my brother and I before bed almost every night. And then he and my mother were stage actors back in the Caribbean. So they already had like this whole taste for storytelling, especially verbal storytelling. They would tell stories about Anansi and Caribbean werewolves and witches and all that good stuff. And then I got into reading when he gave me his old Spider-Man comic books, and I was really excited that I could like read them without him because they were a lot of pictures and not a lot of big words. And then I went into the great illustrated classics like Treasure Island, Kidnapped, all those adventure stories. And then in elementary school, I was reading Stuart Little, and then it ended abruptly. And then I asked my teacher, I want to know what happens at the end. And then my teacher said, there is no end because the author, E.B. White, passed away. I was like, oh. And then she said, well, why don't you write your own story? And I was like, okay. So I did that. That was really cool. I wrote an ending where Stuart fights a giant eagle to get his bird friend back or something like that. And that just set me on the path.
I feel like your story is a little bit better than mine.
Hey, it's not about comparison. We're just sharing our experiences.
Still, yours is riveting. Mine is just kind of there.
I mean, either way, it was a once you write that first story, once you like really have that experience, like there's something in you that just says, "Oh wow, this is really cool. I want to do it again."
Yeah, it's something about knowing that anything can happen because it's your story and you get to decide. And then, after a while, you start caring about your characters as though they're your own children.
Right.
And now that I have children, I can definitely make that comparison. It is very much the same. You're trying to give them everything that they need to survive and be well received by the society that they're in. And if you can grease the wheels on that society just a little bit, it does help things a little bit.
Exactly. You'd be surprised the effect a good story can have on kids. Otherwise, the whole children's literature genre would be in big trouble.
Yep. So, do you want to ask the next question, or do you want me to ask the next question?
I have another good follow up. So, okay. Where did the idea for Word of Yaneshu come from?
Honestly, it wasn't the book that came first. It was the language. It was Jakato.
Oh, nice.
And so, yeah, I developed Jakato first because I had a dream in a language that sounded African-esque, and I wanted to explore what that looked like if I had actually fleshed out the language. So I did that, and then I was like, this would be a waste to just, create a language and then have nowhere to go with it. So I started using Jakato as a means of telling the story of Jakato, and so we get the first couple of lines in Jakato that you see in the entire book. That Tsiensetsi imikilera Jikaro shubele natsi. In the beginning was Jakato came from Mikele. And then it goes on. Uhusaf. Oh my God. Uhusaf. Mineshu Chesinatsi. So all life, actually no. We kind of, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
All life in Yaneshu comes from Mikele. Or it comes from the language, actually. So it goes, God creates language. Language is given to the land, and then from that language, the people are born, or all life is born. And so it's kind of a remix on John 1:1, or John 1:1 mixed with Genesis 1:1. But it's very. I wanted to see if I could do it in the language first, and so it's very realistic to say Jakato did actually create the story for me.
That's so cool.
Ran with it.
Well, let me just say your initial idea story is so much better than mine, because I cannot say the story came to me in a dream and I heard the language first. I cannot say any of that. That is so cool.
Okay, so then what gave you the idea for the Kimoni legacy? And I have a few questions about that, but I'm just going to start with this one first.
Basically, I was reading the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. I was reading Eldest, and then the two characters, Aragon and Rowan, were speaking with Natsuo, who was the only major black character in the entire book. And then after they finish speaking with her, Rowan turns to Aragorn and says, "Oh, does she dye her skin?" And then Aragorn says, "No, it's always like that." And then I was reading that in like 14 or 15. I'm like, they're acting like they've never seen a black person before. And then I thought about it, I was like, oh, they live in the mountains. Of course, they haven't seen a black person before. And then I thought about it for even longer, and I was like, wait, I don't see many black people in fantasy either. So then I was like, you know what? Let me just write one. And then, like, 15, 16 years later, here we are. So it didn't come for me. It didn't come to me in a dream. It came for me just out of a need and or spite, whichever one is more inspirational.
Well, that's actually how the books that I worked on before starting on the Uneshu saga was a duology. Ignition 2084 and Eruption 2085. Both of them are set in a post-Trump America where the MAGA regime has wrecked society, kind of like how they're doing now. We haven't actually got a prologue on that story. The year was 2020. I was livid because of everything that was happening the first go round with this chaos. And so I decided to tell America about itself in the form of an action-packed dystopian war epic. And and it was while I was writing it that I realized, sci-fi and fantasy does not have a lot of black representation in the mainstream. And I know that I'm probably, if I get to mainstream success, it'll probably be entirely by accident and probably be because I ripped society a new one. But it was the motivation for me to do two things. One, try my hand at fantasy for the first time. So glad you enjoyed it, by the way, because this is my first foray into the genre. And two, it really reinforced what I already decided to do, and that was to make all of my protagonists black. Every main character that I ever write will be black, because there's no way I'm going to play second fiddle in my own story.
There you go. that was my like main sale. That was my North Star. It's like everyone has to be black, everyone has to be dark skinned, everyone has to have a strong connection to the land. Otherwise, I really don't want to do it, because at that point, because we all have stories where the black characters are second banana, they're the throwaway love interest, they're the supportive friend, but any story where they're actually fully dimensional people with families, with extended families, with hopes and dreams, etc. That's rare in the mainstream. So I am happy to do my part in that.
Yep, and to support other black artists who are doing the same and who actually get to make it to the mainstream.
Exactly
It's incredibly important. That's the world I want to bring my daughter up in.
Yeah. It's a world I want my nieces and nephews in as well. So thank you for your contribution.
And thank you for yours.
Thank you. I think the next question belongs to you.
Okay, wonderful. So I know that you told me before that you were deeply inspired by Mandinka tradition in society for the overall scope of Nahuala. I don't know why I accented the H.
No, that sounds so cool. I am going to keep that. That sounds really cool.
But I have Mandinka ancestry, and so I've always been curious as to what drew you to us.
That is a very interesting, almost existential question. I really don't know. I always felt like this draw to Mandinka culture. My background is Black American, born to Caribbean immigrants. My parents always told us stories about, the Maroons of Jamaica who came from Africa, most of which were Mandinka. And I always loved Mansa Musa, how he was the richest man in the world at the time. And I just loved the history of the Mali Empire, how it rose, and the influence it had on the world, because Mansa Musa's pilgrimage went to Egypt, and then all that gold filtered around into all over the place. And I just love the idea that he literally crashed the economy of Egypt because he just had so much gold, no one knew what to do with it. That's always like my favorite bit of Mansa Musa trivia. And I think Mandinka culture was like my first exposure to like genuine pre-colonial African societies because my uncle made us watch Roots, the original 80s Roots when I was like 8 or 9 or something. And then at that point, the only exposure to Africa I had was either my parents' stories or the oral stories from my grandmother, or at school where, they basically said nothing existed in Africa before colonialism. So Mandinka and Mandinka culture and Mandinka history was my first real exposure to like, oh, that's what they mean when they said we were kings, because we actually were kings. This is awesome.
Yeah. And so that's actually funny because I do have a little bit of that history and heritage embedded in Uneshu. Now, I know that book one is very archetypal, and that's because I'm trying to ease my audience in.
Yeah.
And just know that this is also a change of pace for me, because usually I just throw people in the deep end, and if you can swim, you can swim. But I figured that since this is my first time doing fantasy, I thought it would be nice. And I'm teaching Jakato through the book. So
Exactly, yeah.
we need to start off slower. We need to give people enough familiarity so that they embrace the new.
Mhm.
But my ancestry on my mother's side, I found out because of African ancestry. If you haven't done one, get one. I found out that on my mom's side, we're equal parts Mandinka, Fulani,
Ooh.
Pele, and oh my God, Mende. There we go.
Men.
I know it's four, and I haven't given the list in a long time. And for some reason, the countries were coming to mind more than the actual tribes. So I'm yeah. Anyway, ADHD moment.
I get that.
I wanted to embed a lot of the culture into the different cultural aspects of the four empires of Uneshu. So everything that we see is, at least in part, something out of my ancestry. So it is paying homage to those who came before me, those who suffered so that I could be where I am. And there's a lot of Black American culture in there too, just kind of intermingled a little bit to the point where you don't immediately recognize it. Or maybe you do. I don't know how you read the book. I'm not in your head.
No, I definitely saw. Yeah, I definitely saw the Mandinka influences. I saw some Black American aspect of it, especially in the character Jachera. Yeah, I could definitely see that he was Black American coded. If it was just subliminally, but yeah, I could definitely see the Black American influence.
Yep. And I did that intentionally because, one, it gives me a framework to work in from each of the empires. It helps me to establish culture outside of the pre-existing cultures. It's yeah, and it was very fun for me to do that because it's like this is very much, from my perspective, a love letter to everything that is Black. And even beyond the dominant cultures, I still pull bits and pieces from everywhere. Some stuff from the Caribbean, some stuff from actually, this goes along with one of your questions, so I'm going to try my best not to go too far ahead. But Yasuke, the African samurai,
I love
is
Yasuke.
also, it's kind of the poster child of, or the main informant to some of the martial arts that you see within the book. That, my capoeira experience, as you know, Afro-Brazilian. So there's, wherever Black people have touched down and made an impact, it's probably referenced in some great or small way within this story.
That is so cool. Oh man, that's really cool. Okay. Well, that actually segues into my next question, which is, describe your research process and how the hell do you come up with 4 different languages for one book?
So, I'm actually a language guy.
Oh,
So
nice.
when I was, let's see, when I was in my junior year, the summer of my junior year, I started teaching myself Japanese. And so with capoeira experience, I've been slowly, and I cannot emphasize that word enough, slowly been learning Brazilian Portuguese. I used to be a whole lot better than I am now. Seminary has taken me through ancient Hebrew and Greek, and those present their own challenges. But I found out that both of them kind of operate as far as like the information density of the terms. They kind of operate in the same way that Jacado does. So depending on the context, you'll see a different manifestation of the meaning. So like, hold up, I have my notebook right here. This is also the letter that you hear about in the story.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
So whenever I'm confused about terminology or what means what, I'll make a reference back to this. So I'm trying to think of one of the, okay, so let's go with mala. Mala can mean look, search, peer, investigate. However, it has something to do with the eyes. It's just a matter of intensity based on what is being talked about.
Nice.
So, Tiafura otabashu malanati. I see you.
Now, you see, this is my first time hearing Jacaro spoken, and it sounds so cool.
Well, thank you for that. And, you know, it is an interesting thing to write this book because there is so much Jacado being used. And so as the book is going on, I'm teaching myself the language. So the dialogue between characters, when they use different commands to evoke different reactions, I make it a point to say that out loud while I write it so that I can get used to speaking Jacado in the way that I've written it's supposed to be spoken. So, Tiafuro Tabashu Malanati is I see you. And that's a very neutral way of saying that. Depending on, so Somi or Tisomio Tabashu Hafura Malanati is I'm looking for you.
Oh, really?
Somi is the word for, as in for this reason. Not exactly for this reason, but the word for individually. So if you have Somi in there, it changes the meaning slightly because now you wouldn't say I see for something. That sounds weird no matter the context, but I'm looking sounds a little bit more like something that we would say in any human language. And so you have so Nkokosi Malanati, to look around.
Right.
Or to peer around as if a corner. So one word can mean many different things that just fall into the general scope of the term based on the context of the sentence. But so I picked that up beforehand. I wanted it to be a little less precise than Japanese because Japanese is a very precise language.
Right.
But so I immersed myself, going back to the original question of how we got here to 4 languages, I immersed myself in different musical types from around Africa. Some of the, of course, Afro beats and Amapiano, but also the forms of music that led into those. So I'm listening to the actual phonetics of different African languages spoken, and I'm recognizing, okay, so this person speaks these languages, these are the common phonetics that they employ, this is what that language looks like individually, and here's where there's some commonality. So there's a difference between Southern Bantu languages and Niger Congo languages, but they have enough of a commonality because of the African language tree that you can kind of see the intersectionality and play around with it if based on how much you know about language. So I organized Jacado in a syllabary because it's easier to just group the sounds together and never have them change than it is to try and put parts of a sound with other parts of a sound and create different parts of a sound. So in that regard, I made it kind of easy on myself. And then from there, it's just a matter of listening to actual African people speak, speak English, speak their native languages, however many those are, but listening to them speak, listening to them sing, listening to them just intone in general will give you enough information to piece something together and inform the spirit of what it is that you're doing. So that said, I don't speak any of the languages that inspire Jakato, but I can identify them by sound.
Oh, okay.
Identify the accent of someone who speaks those languages. Like there's a few Yoruba people who go to my church, and so listening to somebody who just walked through the door and she said, I don't even know what she said. She just started talking to the receptionist, and I'm like, what part of Nigeria are you from? And she's like, you can tell I'm Nigerian.
Yeah, I am finding that after my own research, I've kind of picked on like the little subtle hints where it's like, oh, you're probably Yoruba. Oh, you're probably from Ghana. You're probably you probably speak Twi, or you're probably like a Khan or something like that. It's mostly only West African cultures. I can spot like Ethiopians every now and then because they're all over the DMV area. But and sometimes I get lucky with like someone from Sudan, but for the most part, it's mostly West African people and cultures, and even then, it's only like 4 or 5 out of how many hundreds of thousands of people that are there. But yeah,
and also African content creators. I pay close attention to African content creators on Instagram and Facebook, like Ephraim Lisk. That man is hilarious. He, with his Dr. Abu versus Ephraim skits, parents find out that you got a new job. Just listening to it, I know it's an exaggeration, but that you can't have an exaggeration without having something real.
Right.
And so I know that he's playing around, but that's also something that I can use. That's something that forms how Jakato is supposed to sound versus Imaju versus Katsedu versus Batabadi. And so they all have their own little quirks. And the fun part of the differences between the languages is like, so you've seen Imaju spoken.
Yes.
What's the Yugobi Sechel Ntanu Basi?
That sounds really cool.
And it's very gentle. It just flows.
Right.
Even with the kind of Semitic in the middle, it just and then you have Batabadi, which is much more aggressive. Toham Basi Yetuzo.
Wow, I'm not even gonna try to copy what you just said.
So Yugobi Sechel Ntanu Basi is Yimaju for divine waters, I live through you. And for those who haven't read the book yet, you're going to eventually, because I'm giving you a whole lot of information right now. Over time to not do it. It's a mermaid language.
Oh, yes.
Before evoking any kind of power, they pay homage to where they come from, and that would be the divine waters. With the Batabadi, who use blood magic to accentuate the power of already OP Jakato. Well,
yeah, I was good.
Yeah, because like we'll get into the specifics there. They use blood magic, and so their set phrase, or rather their rallying cry, is Tohambasi Yetuzo. It is our power is in our blood, or something to that effect.
That sounds really cool.
And then there's Katsedu. Katsedu is very much informed by French. So, hold up, because I'm so glad that this had me get on my computer. So I mean, it's not exclusively French, because there are some. So Sibuhadi, Sekitsu Kandogo Wogunde.
That sounds okay. And what does that mean?
Shadows, I'm ready to engage.
Nice.
And so I'll explain more about that in private when we're not on. Because I think you'll really enjoy where these languages fall within the scope of broader Yuneshu. But so Se is not S-A-Y. It's S-E-L-L-E.
S-E-L-L-E.
Yeah. So like in
Sell
say. So
Say.
in French, in most Latin languages, when you have a double L, it becomes silent.
Right.
And so
Oh.
I don't know why, but it happens. It's been a few years since I took French in high school, so maybe if my teacher is paying attention, she can refresh my memory. But the reason for that is there are a lot of African countries that speak French
Mm-hmm.
or have French influence, and even though it is a colonizer language, I don't want to omit any aspect of our blackness,
Mm-hmm.
because, like I said, this is a love letter to us.
Exactly.
And you can't truly love anything or anyone without acknowledging the whole of the person or the whole of the culture. And that includes the ugly parts that we don't like to look at.
Exactly.
And so my languages, they like to North Africa, Northeast Africa, there's a lot of Arabic influence. Also from invasions, but we don't talk about that as much from
No.
that angle as we from the Europeans, but
Yeah.
it's discussion. But even still, I wanted to include that. Just because it's been grandfathered in and we've accepted it a little bit more doesn't mean that it didn't come from horrific events throughout human history. But there's a need to know us, to accept us, and then project everything that we can be. And that
Right.
is ultimately the point of telling this story is we have no limitations. Every time we open our mouths on anything, it's like God opening his mouth and things just kind of happen.
Right.
And so, but I'm sorry, I feel like I'm going too deep into this. So hold up. I'm trying to okay, so you have a few different pathways on display in your story as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like all of them. And they're each represented, I think, very well in the characters of Masilo, Razia, and Kamau.
Mm.
So, what was the inspiration for each of them? Like, where did you draw from? What do you intend to? Oh well, what do you intend to do with them? I know I shouldn't ask that because I'm going to read everything you write from here on out. But,
I developed Kamau first, and he's just an amalgamation or a personification of the whole millennial angst of being stuck between, childhood and adulthood, where as millennials, we did everything we were supposed to do to get to adulthood, but the rewards and trappings of adulthood continue to escape us. Many of us can't afford houses. Many of us still have to work like multiple jobs in this gig economy. Many of us are still neck deep in hustle culture, and we're just working and working and working, but we don't get any of the benefits of adulthood that was promised. And so Kamau came about when I was asking myself, and I was talking to my dad, where he said he preferred the African rituals of coming of age because it's very clear that, hey, if you kill the lion and come back alive, you are a man of this tribe. If you do, if you jump off this thing and survive, you are a man of this tribe. If you do this specific set of actions, you are seen as an accepted adult of this tribe, of this people, and you get all the trappings that come with it. And then as I was going through that, I was thinking, so what happens if you actually fail? What happens then? Are you just stuck in this in between ambiguous zone where no one knows what to do with you? And then I really couldn't find much information about what happens when initiates fail. So that's where Kamau came from, because I was like, okay, what happens when no one really knows what to do with you and you're trying to find your way? But everyone's like, no, you're a kid. And they're like, well, technically I'm not a kid, but technically I'm not an adult either. So you kind of have to find your way through that. And then after Kamau, I was developing Maslow, and originally he was a posthumous character. He was supposed to have died before the events of the book, and Kamau was supposed to be trying to live up to his example. So he was originally going to be like this really untouchable badass who everybody remembers, who everyone speaks fondly of. And then I was writing, I was like, this is kind of boring because I see stories like that all the time where one character is trying to live up to the example of the other character, but it's always when that character is already dead or not influencing the story. So I was like, it'd be really cool if he was actually still around and we could actually see his perspective on it. I wish he was still alive. And then like 2 seconds later, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I can make him alive. No problem. So Maslow just became like this whole. He initially started as like he was the pinnacle, the ideal of what the Kimono mean when they say they want men. He's a warrior. He's charismatic. He's quick on his feet. He knows the politics. He knows when to draw a sword, when to talk, and all that good stuff. But then as I was trying to come up with flaws for him, I was like, that's a lot to put on somebody. How would you actually feel about having all that responsibility on your shoulders, especially so early? So that became like my rolling stone into going more into his personality. And then Rizia was just, she was inspired by Nana Asma'u, who was the sister of the Sotoko Caliph. And she was a scholar. She got married at 12, and she was very astute. She taught other women. She became a very revered poet. And then I thought, oh, that's really cool, because for a lot of women in fantasy, there only seems to be 2 paths, where it's either the badass warrior or the damsel in distress, and there's really no like in between the two. So I really wanted to have a character who was strong but not physically strong, who was capable, but her capabilities come from her empathy, her intelligence, her know-how of situations, and also I just wanted to challenge myself, because both Kamau and Maslow began into a lot of physical fights or magical fights, and I could do that like very easily. But with Rizia, I was like, well, she's 13. She has no martial training, so she can't really just draw a knife and start cutting people. That wouldn't make any sense. So it was really fun to just challenge myself in putting her in situations where Maslow and Kamau could like fight their way out, but she can't do that. So you have to figure out how to, maneuver and use her intellect to get around things. So that's a very long way of saying. That's a very long way of answering that question.
Well, and I appreciate it, because I think all of them present something that's easy to relate to. Like, I am a millennial, so I know exactly how it feels to work and work and work. And the thing that I noticed the most about Kamau's story is that no matter where he goes, everybody expects him to work harder. And it's like, I literally cannot. I'm doing everything that I can already. And work harder is not sound advice. And yet that's something that we as millennials have heard time and time again. If you just work harder, it'll work. But the people who tell us that aren't very conscious of what 2025 looks like in reality.
Exactly.
And so it doesn't work. With Masilo, I default to the Jakato emphasizing the second to last syllable.
It just sounds so cool when you do it. Keep doing it.
And that's the thing about creating a language, is that the longer you swim in it, the more it affects you in real life. So you, like, if I'm in traffic and somebody does something stupid, I have road rage in Jakato now.
that is how I know you made a legitimate language, when you can think and speak at, in those high stressful moments.
It just comes out.
Exactly.
With Masilo, I liked him because he's the golden boy, and but he cracks under the pressure a lot, but nobody ever sees those cracks, and that's what I love about it, because we, especially in a workaholic society like this one, tend to apply so much pressure to people based on our expectations without considering their limitations.
Exactly.
And so I thought that he was a very profoundly written character. And then with Razia, she reminds me of Nihani, actually.
Oh, yeah.
when you look at Nihani's involvement across the book, she is a support type. She does not get very actively involved. They keep her at the back, not because she's a damsel in distress, but because she's crucial to the success of everything. But she's not physically or magically strong enough to bail everybody out.
Exactly.
And so that's actually where I want to go with her trilogy. So I don't think it would be a spoiler to say, and if it is, I'm sorry for those who are watching. But Jacana has his trilogy now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kickoff. So for those of you who are interested in seeing where the series goes, start there. Following him, it's probably going to be Nihani. Nihani gets a trilogy. And so we get to explore more into the mermaid culture and the rift between the two different tribes of mermaids that used to be one, but suffered a break due to the 1,000-year war that happens on mainland Ineshu.
Say less. I'm already in.
So you get to see Nihani as the outcast who struggled to become a healer in the first place. Even though that's kind of an expectation for the two different mermaid tribes. And you get to see her go through and become the diplomat that may or may not bridge the mermaid tribes together. I haven't decided what she's going to do just because you already know where she ends up.
Yeah.
So that could easily be my job is done and now I'm going where I really want to go, or I'm sick of y'all and I'm out.
I have the same dilemma because there's like how many 10 different drafts of the Kimoni Legacy where I like each of the 3 characters end up in a different place, and I'm just trying to figure out just which one of these endings make the most sense now, because draft 1 was totally different from draft 5. Draft 5 was different from draft 7. So, you just have to go where the characters take you, basically.
Yeah. And this is very fun because it's like my culture is coming alive in a very different manifestation. And I'm sure you feel the same. And it's just so fun to watch them work their way through different scenarios.
Yeah. Yes. It's all like, I guess this goes into a bit of a spoiler situation, but like one of my favorite scenes that I wrote was when Rizia was literally backed into a corner. She was by herself, no bodyguard, and then a guy is like coming towards her with a knife or something, and then she has no out, so she just has to figure out how to get out of it. And I was like, oh shoot, I don't even know how you're gonna get out of this, girl.
But I know that you told me before that she was a difficult character to write, not because of the character, but because of the circumstances oftentimes.
Right.
But the way you handled her was logical within the context of the story and in general. She makes sense. She's a brilliant character, and she makes me happy.
That's good.
She makes me happy because she runs contrary to the expectation. And yeah, but I don't want to hold you up. You have other questions that.
Yeah. Let me see. I think we can officially jump into the spoilery. Oh, well, here's one. How did you balance your magic system with the needs of the story without the characters becoming overpowered? Because, like you said, Jakaro is a very overpowered language, because when Jaforda says basically freeze, the person will literally freeze, and like he can go into your memories, he can like summon lightning storms, he can throw up boulders and everything like that. So how do you balance that magic system without just breaking the story?
So that is so each language actually has a connection to the person.
Right.
So you have the Ike, shifting the Ike. You hear that term a lot in Jafoja's or Jafoja / Jacana's story. Sorry, I ordered food before this, and I have to let them in the gate. But
no worries.
Jafoja / Jacana's story revolves around learning how to shift the Ike. And so shifting the Ike is you are stretching your soul out to your creator. You are establishing relationship. You are delving deep within the very heartbeat of your culture on a soul to soul level. And there is a right way to do that and a wrong way to do that, and it all depends on you.
Right.
If you're doing it out of a sincere desire to forge connection, then it works.
Right.
You're not going to get away scot-free because the bigger the command or the bigger the no, let's stick with commands for right now. I don't want to spoil book 2 and 3, but but the bigger the command, the bigger the intent, the bigger the effort. So do you have, and it's just like real life. The more you pour your heart and soul into a thing, the more exhausting it can become for you if you don't pace yourself, if you don't, keep yourself in check. So whenever he does anything big, you see that he collapses, he feels pain in his body. He eventually, gets used to it as the story goes on. The more he has to use Jikato to fight his battles, the more he has to literally talk his way out of things. The easier it becomes to talk his way out of things. The easier it becomes for him not to overextend himself.
Right.
But when it happens out of fear, like when he and Misawe go on that mission from the Ubeshu in the beginning, their beginning,
right.
He does it out of fear and he collapses almost instantly.
Exactly.
Because being purely reactionary is not good. It is. It's a waste of brain power. It's a waste of energy. You end up suffering more because you acted in haste and self-preservation rather than a sincere commitment. And on a tangent, that's kind of like Sinners.
Oh.
Spoiler for that. With Preacher Boy's prayer versus like the whole concept of holy water. Holy water is made with the intent to cleanse. Like it is sincerity in a bottle, basically.
Right.
Preacher
That's
Boy
the way of putting it.
Yeah. Preacher Boy is praying not because he's so sincere, but because he's trying not to get killed in that moment. And it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. I think we need a whole separate live, like with the connection between Sinners and Afro fantasy fiction and all that stuff. I think we need like entire university level studies with that movie.
Yeah, we do. We really do, because there's so much about the intentionality aspect of it that I honed in on, just because maybe it's because I spent so much time in Uneshu, but that is my first mind. How intentional are you with this? Because that determines whether or not it works or it fails. And like I think that's also, nope, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Because I almost brought up Andy. And I almost brought up Andy and the root working and like the we should definitely do a second one now, just to critically analyze that from a new angle. But
I'm game.
But so you have soul with Jikato. With Batabadi, it's passion, it's emotion. They are basically the Sith Lords of this universe. They act out of anger, they act out of a desire to take control. And they do not, whereas you have to keep your emotions somewhat in check to use Jikato appropriately, at least within the context of being an elementary Jikato user. More on that in book 2 and book 3. You don't really have that much restriction. In fact, the more you try to keep your blood inside of your body, the harder it is to use Batabadi. So you have to cut. You have to use the blood in order for Batabadi to work. You have to infuse it with a general outpouring of self, an outpouring of essence, an outpouring of emotion in order for it to function. With Katsedu is much more secretive than both of them.
Wow.
The language name for Katsedu is actually the Flickering Shadow.
That sounds really cool.
It is about espionage. It's about you don't have the ability to just change reality like a Jikato or a Batabadi. So for Katsedu, you have to be a lot more cerebral. You have to think about things in much more capacity. And so you don't pour out your emotions as well as your blood. You don't shift your soul towards your creator. You are working exclusively in your mind. What you see becomes reality, and it uses shadows as a conduit. And then there's Imaju, the divine healing language. This is a matter of will, goodwill extended towards those who need it. And so the successes and the failures of using each of these languages are solely based on the successes and failures of the person. What you find yourself capable of doing, whether it's through your emotions, through your spirituality, through your intellect, or through your will ultimately shape how powerful your command of these languages is.
That is really cool.
And I appreciate that.
I can tell like so much thought was put into all of these languages, so I really appreciate you sharing your insight. And with that, I think we can move into the spoilerly in-depth questions now.
All right. So, I mean, if you want to,
I'm game if you are.
I am. So, why did you kill Nomuleki?
A question I will ask with another question. Why did you kill Joyemba?
Giobena.
Yeah, Giobena.
Okay.
Well, you asked me first, so
that's where you are.
But I guess I'll answer first because you asked first. Mostly because she had the capacity of like making Rizia's life easier in a way because she was, she basically helped raise Rizia. She had several connections that we will go into in book 2 that can and probably will help her later on. But if it was just like, hey, let me just ask Nomuleki to look into X, Y, and Z, it's like, well, that doesn't really help you grow. And also the event needed something like a death that was impactful for Rizia herself to make her understand the seriousness of it, although I'm not sure how much more serious you can get than zombies coming up from the dead, black smoke covering everything, and your homeland being thrown into chaos. But just to throw salt on the wound and twist it up a bit more, I got rid of her.
Well, that definitely did make me a little salty. Because my whole story is about a master and apprentice relationship. And I really do like seeing the strict hardline master with a soft spot for your student that doesn't come out very often, but it does come out sometimes. Right. And I was sitting there every time she and Razia look at each other, and they have she flinches because she's scared of being struck. Right. It honestly takes me back to training with my sensei because he would teach me the moves that I needed to know in order to survive a fight, and then after I learned those moves, he'd throw a cheap shot at me. I guess effective education involves bruises. But I was curious to see, is she going to make Nomuleki soften up even more? And then you killed her.
Yeah.
But that's actually kind of the reason why I killed Giobena. So when we meet Giobena, she is elitist. She's snarky. She has the makings of a great rival for Jacana. Because he, as a street urchin, has had people look down on him for his position his entire, the whole 10 years after the burning of Shifi. Right. So he's in a new space where he finally feels like he's becoming an equal. And that's the first thing that happens to him. So you see Joanna as immediately an op. And as their relationship progresses, you find out she's not exactly heartless. She might be a little rough. She might be a little... She's not nice. I don't think you could never make the case that she's not nice. But in the aftermath of her death, you find out that she's actually very kind.
Right.
she will take care of who needs taking care of because that's just in her. And I killed her precisely because she could have been a great rival to Jacana. I didn't want you to develop. No, I wanted you to develop an attachment to her. That was before her death or after. I feel like the aftermath, when they're thinking about her and remembering her sacrifice, it really does rub a little salt in the wounds in that regard. Because it's just the death is impactful by itself, but then the aftermath, like, you really didn't have to do this to me. And I'm saying, like, but I think I did, though.
Yeah, because I think like what makes her death so impactful is like the whole what could have been. Because as I was reading her interactions with Jacana, and the other was like, oh, I know you are going to be like a ride or die when all this is over. You're going to be one of the most reliable ones. You're going to be the most loyal supporter and everything like that. And then when she dies, I was like, oh man. And like as the story progressed, I was like, oh, I can see where she would have came in handy. I can see where her presence would have been really helpful here. So that was very effective.
It's real life. You don't always get to explore the relationship. Sometimes people leave, sometimes people die, and there's nothing you can do about it except remember them for what you had. And so I like, as fantasy as this is, there's a lot of reality in it. And I've just realized that I don't have the ability to leave verisimilitude out of my writing. So it just is, we're going to be real in our fakeness together.
I think one of the best ways I heard describing fiction and nonfiction is when you use history and real people to teach lessons. Fiction is when you use character, setting, and plot to teach lessons. So the people may be fictional, but the lessons they're teaching are very real.
Yep. And to that end, a lot of my characters are, well, not in this one. A handful of them are based on real people. And with Ignition and Eruption that I mentioned before, almost every character in those stories is based on someone I actually know or have known in my real life.
Oh.
And I think it helps me to stay grounded to a certain extent if I'm thinking about, so like Jifoja and Isawe, Jacana and Isawe. Their whole relationship is kind of the central point of book one.
Right.
And it is developing a closeness to your master. One of the things that I've experienced with Isawe's inspiration, I call him Azalau. His name is Jamie Ellerby. Azalau is his capoeira name. And
that's a very cool name.
That's how we started. It means hummingbird, because the same level of energy that you see a hummingbird fly with is the same kind of energy you'll see him fly with if you get in a fight with him. But he has been a very impactful mentor to me. And not even through, not exclusively through capoeira, but through swordsmanship as well. He's my kenjutsu teacher. And so he's shown me through 700-year-old samurai and shinobi styles of swordsmanship repackaged as the 7 forms of lightsaber combat, and we can have a whole sidebar on that too.
Yeah.
He's shown me so much of what it means to be a master, what it means to be a student. The word sensei is not Japanese for master. It's actually the one who has gone before.
Oh, I did not know that.
They got struck so you don't have to. They learned the lesson so that it's easier to teach you. All you have to do is sit there, shut up, and listen. And then you'll be amazed at how few problems you actually have when push comes to shove. And so there's you see that, since we're in spoiler territory, you see that once Isawe and Jacana are separated, Jacana only has what his master has given him.
Right.
And even though he does share notes with Giovanna and Gichera, those connections were only brought about because he accompanied his master in the first place. So he goes from being the right hand man, the immediate student, to having to apply what he's learned from his master in real world scenarios.
Mm.
And that's the truth of it. You don't prepare your students to remain students. You prepare them to succeed. You prepare them for a world where you are no longer a part of the equation. And so Yisawe comes back, but
Yeah.
but Jacana is confronted with that reality. I can't just go to my master and figure this out. I have to use thought to figure this out for myself. And so it's coming of age is, I feel, a reductive term for it, even though it is accurate for book one.
Right.
Because as you see him grow, you'll start to see what that means. What does it mean, master, really? Is it just that you've mastered the concept, or that you're able to pass that concept on?
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
And one real cool thing I think that you did was you didn't just kill you didn't kill Yisawe, because in a lot of these stories it's easy for just to kill the master and then to leave the student on their own to figure things out. But you actually separated them. Jacana, he comes into his own as a leader and as a student. So then by the time he reunites with Yisawe, their relationship is different, because it's like, okay, I've gone through this trial using your teachings, but I did it on my own. And now that I found you, you know, I'm not just a student, like I have advanced. So now the relationship is different. And so the student teacher dynamic has to change too. And you don't always see that in fantasy, because the master never sees their student progress. They always die right before they reach the pinnacle. So once they reach the pinnacle, the relationship is different. So I'm really excited to see how their relationship changes, and if Yisawe reveals more secrets to him, or if he's more open, because now he's proven that he can handle it. So I'm really excited to see that to see that aspect of it.
And I'm glad, and I'm actually really excited to see what Subi and Kamau get up to. At first, I thought that Master Abedi was going to be his Yisawe, but Master Abedi is so dismissive. Cares about his experimentations, and I can't see him realistically giving Kamau the time of day. With him, for whatever reason, he is approved to use magic, and that's not going to necessarily be the case across the board.
Right.
And you've done a good job of making it very clear that in order for Kamau to be effective in anything that he does, he's going to have to grow comfortable with breaking the rules and challenging the society that he's in.
Right.
And so Subi is the only one who just does not care and has a close enough relationship with him to be that Yisawe. Even though they're around the same age, he strikes me as my master does in real life. I'm excited to see where that goes in book 2. Hurry up with that, by the way.
No pressure. I mean, the first one only took 15 years, so.
With all the love in my heart, hurry. You've created a fan. That's your own fault. And I can't help you.
Hey, if I have one fan, that means I'm rich.
I love that, but I'm going to posit that when I'm rich, I will be rich.
Yes, that is important too. Here's another question for you. The dagger, Mahute, is such he's a really effective villain, because his whole point is the hoarding of Jakaro among the elites. But how do you write a villain like that without making him too sympathetic? Because we've seen it with like Magneto and Killmonger and other villains who are supposed to have a good point, but they're still ultimately villains. But a lot of people just see their revolutionary tactics and not necessarily their more harmful tactics. So how do you strike that balance with him?
So I'm so glad we're in the spoiler section, because now I can. So Mahute and Yisawe are brothers, and they were both sold into slavery by their parents.
Right.
More on that in book 2.
Right.
But the part that's relevant is they both take different paths. One uses his past bondage to, disrupt society in the worst possible way. Like he doesn't think that those people matter anymore because to him or to them, he didn't matter. So
Right.
now he's trying to empower people that are like him, that have never mattered, by completely disregarding everybody else that could be caught up as collateral damage.
Right.
And so he's I would say irredeemable in that it's not even that he can't see the value in the other people, it's that he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to see the point in the benefit of all of Yuneshu. He only sees the vision for his Yuneshu, where he can no longer be taken advantage of, where he can no longer be at the mercy of somebody else. Isawe, on the other hand, becomes a Kanawe. He joins the Saweshe order. He becomes a Kanawe. He takes on a student for himself because he thinks that upholding the good parts of society is where we ought to be. That's how we honor those who have come before us. That's how we honor the struggle that we have been a part of. And both of them have the perspective of ensuring that people in that level of vulnerability do not have the same struggle.
Right.
And so now Isawe is definitely more idealistic because he thinks he can change the system from the inside, and that almost never works.
Never.
If it becomes broken, you need to burn it down and start over.
Right.
Hint, hint, America. But for legal reasons, that's a joke. But it is, their dynamic is interesting because it is very much the Killmonger versus T'Challa. Except whereas Killmonger is the sole product of slavery, or the sole product of being in a colonized world, whereas T'Challa has never experienced that for longer than a few days.
Right.
They both have had the exact same experience. And it's like when you have somebody or two people who grow up in an alcoholic, abusive household, and one decides that they're going to follow in the footsteps and the other decides that they're never going to touch the stuff. It's playing with that idea of just because we have been here, just because we have suffered the same, we don't have to inflict harm on other people, or we don't have to inflict harm on other people to demolish the constructs that bound us. And so that's also an interesting point for Chikana, because he's the student in all of this.
Right.
He's having to look at this situation. He's hearing what Mahute is saying, and he's also hearing the lessons from his master. And so him, the next generation of teacher, he has to decide, are we going to preserve life, or are we going to kill whoever we need to in the name of our own misguided sense of justice? That said, Mahute is 100% correct. He is. And it's just like Isawa's master told him. He's right. He's wrong in how he goes about it, but he's right.
Right.
And so the fact that he is the outsider who is raging against the machine in such a way that it affects everyone's notice should be cause for us to not try to silence him, but try to understand where he's coming from.
Exactly. I am really, really excited to see what happens to them in book 2, because the way it ended, there's definitely going to be I want to say almost like an arch rivalry going on there.
Well, it's going to be amazing, and I want to tell you about it, but I can't, because we're spoiling them. We're not spoiling each other.
Exactly.
But Subi's uncle, I'm blanking on the name right now because I have mozzarella sticks and they're making me very happy.
Halisi.
There we go. I'm actually very happy at how close I was in my mind on that. But Halisi actually strikes me as, like, he and Mahute would have such a great conversation if they were ever in the same place at the same time. Like, just how they could probably teach the masterclass on how to be a renegade.
Exactly.
And to do so from the shadows.
Yeah.
But no, regarding how to make him not too sympathetic, it's very obvious that he suffered a lot. But he also kind of destroyed his brother's family along with an entire town, and he has vampires and
Yeah.
patrolling the whole of Uneshu, trying to murder people. He goes after the Saweshe, the Kanawe, and their Ijaya together. And there's a lot of Jakaro in all of this. I'm sorry. For the uninitiated, I apologize because we know it, but you have never heard these terms. So they're going after the masters and their apprentices together. And you know that there's that whole business about the living Sawesh's blood and what you can do through Batabadi. And so I really wanted to paint the picture of he has grand ideations for the success of restoring the culture of Uneshu overall. But there is so low he won't sink to. And honestly, he makes it fun.
Writing villains is very fun.
Yeah. But so what about you with Halisi? How did you because when we see him, or at least the trick is that he is a cripple. And he has to be tended to by other people. But we know that is very much not the case. He is the one that holds all of the power for pretty much the entirety of the book, and we don't know this until the end. And so you create him as the sympathetic outcast who also happens to be a master manipulator of everyone and everything. So what was your process like? How did you approach creating him and making me both love and hate him at the same time?
Well, just in like a lot of fantasy, the villain is almost always really obvious. You know, your Saurons, your Darth Vaders, your Galbatorix from Aragon, your Voldemorts. Like, it's always those guys in like dark leather, horribly scarred faces, towers, and orc mooks, stormtroopers, etc. Like, everything about him just says, "I am the villain." And they always get people to follow him just out of fear, but you never really get into why someone would follow them willingly. And then as I was writing and as I was storyboarding, world building, etc., as I was creating the Kamoni clan, I was like, there's no way they would let someone like Sauron or Voldemort or whatever just come to power, stay in power, and become a major rival. They would nip that in the bud as soon as they had the hint of something that was going down. And then as I was like doing the history and everything, I realized that if like in order to defeat the Kimona, you would have to move in the shadows because as you know, the king, the Kingdom Clan, they basically got rid of their spy network essentially. So that created an opening as to how he could come to power, and most of the times, even in real life, the danger is not always readily apparent. Like it's like these massive conglomerations, these massive companies have their hands in everything, but if you saw their CEO, if you saw the people who were actually in charge of it, you really wouldn't know them. You just know the entity, not the person behind it. So I thought, oh, that's a great way for an evil for someone to like move about. And then in terms of making him, sympathetic, I thought it was a cool way to twist on the mentor trope in fantasy, because the mentor is always like that kooky outcast hermit guy who everybody trusts, even though no one really knows anything about him. So I was like, it would be so easy for someone to just roll in with their knowledge and just like have their hands in everything, and no one will pay them, and no one will give them a second glance. That was the important part. When you look at Halisi, you never give him a second glance, and that's exactly how he wants it to be.
Yep, and I fell for that trap. I feel like when you've been writing for longer than a year, um, when you start exploring the different devices, the different tropes, the different ideas, there's not a whole lot that can surprise you.
No.
And it's always nice to be pleasantly surprised with something different. And that was different enough for me to be like, oh, I like that. I'm mad, but I like that. Because like there's also a level of I should have seen that coming when you've been writing for longer than a year. Because nothing is supposed to surprise you. So when it does, it's like, oh, yes, finally. But it's also like, oh, I'm not as good at this as I thought I was.
Yeah, a couple of the comments I had in development said, "Oh, you should make the bad guy more readily apparent." And then I thought about it, but then I was like, "Well, that wouldn't make any sense because as soon as he exposes himself, the game is over. Because if they know exactly who to go after, then everything comes apart." So it was strategic where he revealed himself because he really only revealed himself to Kamau and Subi and Inako, 3 outcasts who no one's going to believe anyway. So even his reveal was planned by him.
And it's like in Rogue One where Darth Vader is purposefully using the Force to flap his own cape for dramatic effect. And because there's no wind in space. There's no wind in space. He is being an absolute diva there. And you have to enjoy a villain who has a flair for the dramatic.
I mean, you kind of need a flair for the dramatic to be a villain. Like you don't get to call yourself the Dark Lord of the Sith if you're modest about anything.
Yeah, and it's the same with Mahute. Mahute, he waits. He's still in the bakery just like everybody else, but he purposefully waits for their meeting in the back room to start and for them to start discussing him. And that's his cue to enter the scene with 3 vampires to start killing people, making threats, telling them what his plan is. And he's I don't like villains who monologue.
Right.
Because usually the monologuing is at the moment where they're about to do the thing.
Right.
Mahute is not monologuing, he's prophesying. This is what I'm going to do. And there's nothing that any of you will be able to do to stop me.
Right.
Because it's because they're dead.
It's like, I'm going to kill you guys anyway. I might as well give you my whole spiel because you're not going to survive it anyway.
And if that's the resolve that you have, then the monologuing makes sense.
Right.
You put it at the moment before you get to the killing. Because if you put it at the moment before you get to the actual doing, they have room to stop you. I want you to feel like Mahute is not going to be easily stopped because he's not.
Mm-hmm.
He might have his weaknesses too. They're getting fewer by the book, by the way. But just because he has his weaknesses doesn't mean that you will be able to take advantage of those so easily.
Mm.
Like he's spent 20 years in prison. He knows what his weaknesses are. He knows what are better than you do because while he was there mulling it over inside his head, you were out frolicking in Yuneshu. So he comes in with this master plan, and you're not going to be able to see what he has in store until book 3.
Mm.
There's like I said, book 1 just eases you in. It's like it's like A New Hope. You know, it's enough to be able to follow along. It introduces you to some new terminology and some new concepts, but it doesn't really. We don't know what the Clone Wars are until the 90s.
Yeah,
and
even then, our understanding of the Clone Wars is vastly different as time goes on because the animated Clone Wars we saw in like the early 2000s is a vastly different beast than the computer animated Clone Wars we saw with Dave Filoni. I personally prefer the animated Clone Wars because it showed the Jedi like much higher power scale, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think both of them were very realistic tactically,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that I was looking for. Like with that, and that's something that I wanted to look forward to in Uneshu. You build into the tactics. When we first meet him, he is literally a child. He
Right.
doesn't do anything. He doesn't know anything about anything. He is a desert rat.
Yeah.
Adoptive parents get smoked on the doorstep, quite literally. And it's only after A New Hope do we see any kind of military shifting in real time.
Mm-hmm.
The boy out on an adventure to rescue a princess haphazardly because he has no understanding of really anything.
Right.
So then it's such a night and day experience when you get to Empire, and he's in league with the Rebel Alliance, and they're making moves based on their understanding of their enemy. And so now Luke is no longer the whiny kid who's trying to go down to Tashi Station to pick up power converters. He's
Right.
he's a leader of the rebellion and a Jedi to boot. And so that's kind of, I've told you before that Heart of the Ijaya is my A New Hope.
Yeah.
So by the time we get to Empire, it's going to be a little bit darker. It's going to be a little bit stronger. It's going to show you a little bit more of that maybe not tactical balance at first, at least not when it concerns Jacana.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll show you that we're not at the beginning leg of this journey anymore.
Right, exactly.
We have more responsibility. The stakes are a little bit higher. Mahute is still running roughshod over general in societies. And we have to play things a little smarter.
Mm-hmm.
You also get to see Katsedu in a much more, like, you got like maybe 3 lines of Katsedu in book 1. You're gonna get like whole paragraphs in Katsedu in book 2. So brace yourself. You're gonna have to. I mean, it's not, and I'm not gonna explain any of it.
Works for me.
Like I'll explain in like shortly after the initial line has gone through what they said, but I'm not gonna break down for you how Katsedu works in relation to Shikado. That's going to be its own trilogy, and that's going to be Kamari's trilogy, actually.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask about that. At the end of each chapter, you have like an interlude with Jacana and Kamari. How did that how did that come about? Was that something you had later, or was that something you always wanted to add in?
Well, so it came about for 2 reasons. One, so I was a teacher before full-time ministry. And I worked here in Arizona. I worked mostly with freshmen and sophomores, but through the lightsaber dueling club I ran on campus, and again, I have to have a whole conversation about that. I kind of familiarized myself with the entire school, and there was one kid who, he was a senior, but he had been through the foster care system, and his uncle was his caregiver at that time, but he struggled to really connect with people.
Right.
And so through me teaching him Kenjutsu through the lightsaber dueling club, we actually grew kind of close. So when he graduated, he kept in touch, and he basically adopted me. Yes, he adopted me, not the other way around. Usually, with education, your kids adopt you before you have the opportunity to say yay or nay. And so, in the years since he graduated, we have gotten very close, and I do see him sort of like a son. And so I wanted to incorporate him into the story. Also, he's read like every word that I've written since 2021. So I thought it would be nice for him to see himself in the story, how we both see him in real life, as being my son. So and for greater context, in case it was lost, Jacana is me.
I kind of figured.
Well, for those who might be a little, if I'm moving a little too fast, because I do know I talk fast, and I move through ideas without really explaining them sometimes. So it's more of a spot checking for me, not necessarily for anyone else. So I thought it would be cool for him to see himself in the book, and you know, looking at that, I didn't want it to just be, you get to see the part where he's telling the story, and that's it. You just see
Right.
that father moment. I wanted I wanted this book, The Word of Ineshu, in general, to teach the languages that I've created. So, what better way than to have Jacana sit down and tell Kamadi the story of his ancestors? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's going to be more revealed in book 2, by the way. We're not just
Oh
going to,
yeah.
yeah. So the immediate like Kamadi to Jacana to Isawe is like, oh, well, we've been in the spoiler territory for a while,
Yeah.
but it that is like phase 1 of Kamadi's ancestry. In
Gotcha.
book,
Okay.
in book 2, you get to see a whole lot more of their ancestors revealed. Because remember, Jacana at this point does not know anything about his own ancestry. The whole
Okay.
of this book is him discovering who he actually is.
All
Book 2,
right.
it continues on with that. And so
Say
for
less.
Kamadi is learning about his history, his personal history, his family history, and the history of Ineshu all through the story and through learning Jakado.
Hmm.
And it gives him something to latch onto, just like it gives us something to latch onto.
Hmm.
When you're learning languages, the most efficient ways to learn languages there are 3. Active conversation, where you get to apply the language.
Mm-hmm.
Stories, either hearing them or reading them, because it gives you a familiarity with the language on a cognitive level. Or music. We naturally gravitate towards rhythms, and rhythms are used as vessels for learning. You can barely tell me what the ABCs are without singing the song.
Right. Exactly.
And so, within this story, you've seen that we have conversations that happen in Jakarta. Chapter 8. How did you
Right.
feel about that?
It was really cool, and I thought, okay, this is something that I'm sure they're saying something very important, and I can get that from context, but I can't fully understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But I got some translations, and from the way they were reacting to each other, I was like, oh, that's probably what they said here. That's probably what they mean here. So that was really that was a cool experience as opposed to it just being one long page after page of info dump. I was like, oh, okay, now I'm where Jakarta is, where it's like I kind of understand it, but I'm relying on context clues.
Yeah. So the more you read the book, the more the vocabulary that you learn in previous chapters factors into the next chapters. So
Mm-hmm.
you're actively scaffolding your own lessons through what Jacana is teaching Kamadi, and you're building up your own understanding. So when he goes into the next part of the story and he's a little bit more liberal about speaking the Jacado parts, you see that, and you'll see that I'm a little more liberal about using the Jacado font
Mm-hmm.
when he's speaking the Jacado parts. So
Gotcha.
it's an active test to get you to stop relying on the English transliteration so that you
Mm-hmm.
can get to seeing it and hearing it in your head. So I'm giving you the story part. I'm giving you the practical part, but I'm also giving you the songs because
Mm-hmm.
after Ninki Nanka is vanquished,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that was an interesting spin on Ninki Nanka because Ninki
Yeah.
Nanka is a river monster, but
Mm-hmm.
depending on who you ask, it also has the capacity to operate on land.
Ooh, that's terrifying because those things
Yeah,
are they're huge.
yeah. So it's said that if I'm not mistaken, it's Ninki Nanka. If you see it and you manage to escape, you're not going to survive because it'll track you down. So,
Yeah.
so I live inland and I see it on the river and I run away and
You're,
I get tracked down by it. It makes sense that it would be able to walk on land. So I didn't want to have Ninki Nanka appear out of any of the great rivers. I wanted to have Ninki Nanka track them down. And that's
mm.
exactly what happens. And when they battle and they come in and they're being celebrated, they're singing songs.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you see the lyrics on the page, you can kind of intuit the rhythm of the songs as you go.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I'm not going to sing it on this live. I'm not going to embarrass myself.
I wasn't going to ask you to.
But it's important to the creation of the cultures in Uneshu to have that as an extra conduit for the language. We have to have songs, stories, practice, because I want you as the reader to learn the language. Because could you imagine walking down the street? Sabele jewo otobara jishemu haranatsi. Sageja nawe haranatsi. Chilota bada jumanatsi. You just hear them having a whole conversation in Jakarta because they read this book and they watched it, or they looked at my Instagram or something. And that's what I want. I want it to be, us. I want it to be us being able to communicate in a way that is not easily appropriated.
Yeah, see, that's the important part.
Mm-hmm.
We are approaching an hour and a half, so let's do some speed rounds, because I can talk to you for another 5 hours and it'll be awesome.
Yep, and I realize we should probably exchange numbers after this, just to keep the conversation when we want to.
Yeah.
But
all right. So I think I asked you the last question.
Yes. Okay. All right. So I think at this. Okay. So let's see. I'll ask you this one. What was the hardest scene for you to write, both in an emotional and a prose sense?
Ooh. Okay. Emotionally.
I know we said speed, and I just asked a very heavy question, so my bad.
No. Well, for each character, there's always like a difficult scene emotionally. So, for Kamal, the hardest emotional scene was that last scene between him and his mother, where he's packing, and then she tells him, basically, I hope you don't embarrass us out there. And then he asks, why have you never been proud of me? And then she says, well, what have you done to make me proud? That kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, man, this is terrible.
Yeah, no, that's why me and your wife can't stand.
I keep telling her that she's not that bad. But as I was rereading, I was like, oh, yeah,
that she is certifiably backhandable. I would consider myself a gentleman, but like, if I ever heard a parent in general say, "What have you done to make me proud?" to their child, I'm backhanding you. Or what your gender is. That is one. You don't talk to children like
that. And then for Rizzy, I think the hardest emotional scene is when she finds the body of Nomuleki and her friend Asiya, who she was trying to save. So, because that was really hard, because she went through a whole lot to try to save them and it didn't work. And I was like, I kind of want to save her, but it's like, this is an important lesson for Rizia to learn. You can't really save everybody, but she's going to try, because that's just how she is. And then with Maslow, there's like a couple. I guess the most emotional one was when he has to do his slave run, and then he meets I'm totally blanking on his name, and I feel horrible as the author, but the guy who admired him and who challenged him to the fight for the slaver's freedom. I was like, this is really bad, but this seems right. So I'm gonna keep it.
Yep. No, so if I had to say which one was my toughest, there's a few, because you see that I just be playing with people's lives in this story.
Don't we all as authors?
Everyone is fair game. So, like, I haven't decided if by the end of this, Jacana is going to live or die. Like, I haven't decided on direction for the third book. So it could happen within the context of the timeline that we have right now. It could be we reach the end of that timeline with the second book, and by the third one, we're living in the aftermath of all of those decisions.
Right.
And so Kamadi has to see his father fight. But I don't want to go into it because I'm just going to confuse myself. The the hardest scene that I've had to write. Let's see. I would say prose wise,
Mm-hmm.
the very beginning when you see a young wizard with his because I don't want to spoil that part because then it spoils the whole book. But when you see that first moment between the father and the son in the outer grasslands outside of Shifi, and like I felt like I needed to introduce the otter beasts, like what they are. It's like what you told me about trying to create expressions for your mermaid story that are expressions that we use in the real world. So I had to, like, everything that they talk about is very much an introduction to Yuneshu proper, specifically the nation of Yirakili. And not even the whole nation, just their holy city. So trying to figure out how to give a little bit of emotional depth to that while also being informative was a real challenge. And then, of course, we have to introduce Jakato in the same breath.
Right.
So when that's not Kamadi. When the son asks to hear a story on the way back into town, and then the father starts speaking the story in Jakato, and he gives us that line of, in the beginning, Jakato came from Ikele, and all life in Yuneshu was born from the language. His response is, "That's not fair. I don't know that much Jakato yet." And so you get the name of the language, you get to see the language in front of your face,
right?
And you get to see a little bit of playful banter between father and son. So that was a challenging one for prose, just because I didn't want you to read that and be immediately confused. Right. So the fact that you've gotten from page 1 to page 500 and whatever it is says that you did not get confused, and that was the hardest emotional scene. There are 3. The first one is when that same child from the beginning, his mother in zombified form is chasing him through the streets trying to eat him.
Oh yeah, I was like, oh god, this starting with some horror. Awesome.
Yep, we gotta start hard and heavy. You can handle the easy stuff after we get to, like, I have ADHD, so I know that for me, I need action now. I can be swept up in a magical explanation. I can be brought in with wordplay and humor, but you're only going to get that. You're only going to get so far with me on that. If you have stuff exploding and people dying and chaos is ensuing and nobody knows why or how, now you had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
You're speaking my language.
The second emotional scene, when Jifoja remembers that his real name is Jacana.
Oh yeah, that was a great scene.
Because he hears his mother for the first time in 10 years in his head explaining why he bears the name Jacana. He's confronted with the reality of who he is after 10 years of having that identity squashed by the people around him. Jifoja is not his name. Jifoja is the name that was given to him as a street urchin from a community that was not used to dealing with the poor.
Right.
And I feel like I'm preaching right now because like every part of this book is layered and coded in a way that if you spend just a little bit of time with it, you'll be able to see, oh, he's ripping us to shreds. Yes, I am. Unapologetic. Argue with your mama, not me.
There you go.
The third scene that's very emotional is when that father and son who were separated in Shifi all those years ago finally recognize each other and are brought back together. And I'm glad that I was able to say that in code so that I did not spoil the entire book.
Yeah, they still have to go out and read this thing.
Yeah, it's and that was a challenge too, because it's been 10 years since they last saw each other, so they don't know. It's not going to be as easy as just, oh my God, Dad.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, I can't stand it when they have characters separated for a lengthy period of time and they automatically recognize each other, like faces, body types,
Right.
character has not changed. Even the manner in which we speak changes over time. So
Yeah.
there are so many reasons why you would not make that connection immediately. And it's like through the whole entire book, you're like, is he?
Maybe.
But I'm not.
Right.
And you have to really think about that. Is it actually him, or is he just latching on to the first person that kind of feels like he did?
You're right. Safe and familiar.
Yeah. So there's plenty of room for unreliable narrator there too. But I decided to not gaslight my protagonist or make him crazy. But yeah, that's the last emotional scene. And also writing it in a way that didn't come off cheesy.
Oh yeah, that's always with these emotional scenes. Like cheese easily just flows into it. Like I had to rewrite so many scenes because I couldn't reread them. I was like, wow, this is terrible.
The never-ending struggle of the author.
Exactly.
Question.
I think we are about to hit 1 hour and 45 minutes, so let's close this out so people watching aren't just stuck with us for another 3 hours. What is your advice for aspiring authors?
Ooh. Okay. That is a hard question, but a necessary one. Advice for aspiring authors: absorb as many stories as you can, and pay close attention to what resonates with you.
Because that's a good one.
There's a reason why it resonates, and that is where you'll find your playground. If you are looking for your playground, then it minimizes the amount of work you're actually doing.
Yeah, that is nothing as deep as that, but I would say read as much as possible, read outside your comfort zone as much as possible, and remember to make your characters people, not just characters, because in recent memory, people are obsessed with like trope-based writing, and trope-based writing doesn't always work because characters are limited by their specific trope and they're not allowed to be an actual person. Because I've read several books where it's like, that's not how a rational, normal person would respond to this thing. So I would say observe people, read about people, and just make your characters people.
Yeah, no, and to that end, dialogue.
Yes.
Talk to yourself often.
Yeah.
Because if you are I had a teacher once who said good writing usually requires good acting.
Yeah.
So if you vibe with what it is that your characters are saying, it's probably because you said it from a place of reality. This is how I would react in this situation, not this is how a character would react in this situation, like what you were saying. And like you can take Jacana and Jachetta every time they talk to each other. It is hilarious because like how many times did Jachetta get stabbed? And he like that comes up like how many times am I going to get stabbed on this journey? Like it was me asking the question to myself, like, sir, there's a ragtag group of 4 and you keep stabbing the same guy. But then the answer to that is very obvious. If I didn't stab the same guy, then that line would be lost. And it's not, there you go. That sounded realistic for the context. But if you just talk to yourself, even if it's through the characters, it helps. It adds a sense of realism to what it is that you're writing.
There you go. And I think that's a good place to close out. Where can the people at home find this amazing book?
Everywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, if that's what floats your boat. Literally everywhere. in print and ebook. So you don't have to spend the $28.99 on the physical copy of the book. I would argue that it's better, but that's my personal preference. You can spend all of $3 and get the ebook and have the same effect.
There you go. All right, and I think that's everything. If you are in the viewing audience and you stayed until the end, thank you so much. We appreciate you enduring our nonsense, and I hope you all learned a great deal about the word of Yaneshu and the Kimoni legacy. Jordan, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for speaking with me, and I hope you have a happy Juneteenth.
You too. Thank you for literally all of this.
No problem. And we will definitely speak again on live and DMs, on the phone, whatever. Just we will keep in touch.
Yes, we will, because I need more clarity. There's some questions on here that I was looking forward to asking and we didn't get to.
Well, we will have to do a part 2.
All right. Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. All right. I will see you next time.
All right. You have a good evening.
You too.
Bye.